taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Great. Okay, so the final session, we're going to cover verses 5 through to 8. So it's a nice number of verses, 8. Small, not too much to deal with. Succinct, but very meaningful. So in terms of the commentary, we're on page 284. And we're dealing with the 5th verse. So we'll start again at the beginning of that section, so right at the very top there. 5th, training ourselves to accept the defeat without harboring any resentment. Even when faced with misfortunes such as slander and so on, is presented in the following. So verse number 5. When others treat us out of jealousy, treat me wrongly with abuse and slander, I shall train to take the defeat upon myself and offer the victory to others. So this is the 5th verse. Now, just in brief, as a summary of what we've done, we have really the first 3 verses, 1 to 3, and then we have another section, verses 4, 5, 6. And then we have another section, which is verse 7, and then another section, really, which is verse 8. So the first 3 verses are giving us the general practice. So just in brief, the first verse advises us to train in treating others as supreme. And the second verse advises us to train in seeing ourselves as the lowest of all. And the third verse then is a general advice on practice, which tells us to examine our mind frequently and see what's happening there. And if an afflicted mental factor, a non-virtuous mental factor arises, then we should identify it and eliminate it immediately. So in a sense, this is general advice on how we should practice in short, in simple. When we're actually identifying the afflictions internally, such as anger and desire, attachment, and so on, we then apply the antidote to avert or to stop that affliction, that afflicted mental faculty from arising or from continuing. We stop it. Then we have 4, 5, and 6, which are really dealing with others who are especially difficult for us to handle. So verse 4 is dealing with those of unpleasant character, and it's advising us to treat those who are just difficult to get on with as a treasure of precious jewels. We should see them as something of rare value, instead of normally trying to avoid them and think badly about them. It's a normal reaction to others who are of unpleasant character. So we have to stop that. So then we treat them as like a precious jewel. Now, the second type of person that is being spoken of here is verse 5. Those who are jealous, abusive, and tend to divisive speech and so forth. So they're another type of person that we have difficulty with. Everyone has difficulty here. So the verse reads, when others out of jealousy treat me wrongly with abuse and slander, I shall train to take the defeat upon myself and offer the victory to others. So it identifies the problem and it gives us the solution. And the solution tends to go against our habitual practice with dealing with difficult people. So then Geshe Chekawa goes on to say, regardless of whether we are to blame, if others slander us or speak ill of us out of jealousy or other motives, instead of harboring resentment, we should respond with a gentle mind. So the technique is easy enough to understand. It's the application which is often difficult for us or even beyond our reach. We really struggle to engage in this sort of practice. Instead of harboring resentment, which is our normal strategy, we resent it immensely, we should respond with a gentle mind. Now, that may appear weak to us and almost being generous to a fault, or almost a fault of being compassionate to someone who is harming us. But here, Geshe Chekawa is advising us we should refrain from responding with a negative mind. We should respond with a gentle mind, free of resentment.
Ian, can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
I think I know, but I'm just wondering specifically, you talked about that people who challenge us that we see as being bad, as being very precious. And
yes.
what is, I mean, I can kind of imagine what the idea is, but behind that, that's to help us feel more benignly toward them. I'm taking it that encourages.
Oh, well, actually, not only benign, it's actually reversing the entire process. So look, just as if we can go back to page number 277, and which has verse number 1. So the verse number 1 really gives us sets the tone of the entire practice. And verse number 1 says, with a wish to achieve the highest aim, which surpasses even a wish-fulfilling gem, I shall train myself at all times to cherish sentient beings as supreme. So here again, it's this core practice. And under that, it says, in general, in order to train yourself to view each sentient being as a wish-fulfilling gem. So it even takes us a step further. We see them as wish-fulfilling gems. You should recall 2 important points of similarity shared by sentient beings and the precious gem. So why it's not just having a sort of a neutral attitude in that situation, but it's actually turning it full 180 degrees and seeing that being as like a precious gem, moreover like a wish-fulfilling gem. Now, yes,
part of that, I'm assuming part of that is that they are doing you the favor of giving you, this is my hypothesis, giving you the challenge that if they weren't around, you wouldn't be able to, kind of clear your head as well and your heart. If everybody was nice to you, then you wouldn't have the same kind of opportunity to expand. Is that where we're headed here?
Absolutely, that's the case.
Yeah. Okay.
They're giving us the opportunity to practice patience, and patience is like a jewel in its own right that protects us. It's like our defender. And so anyone that gets under our skin, that pushes all our buttons, we should value, as a supreme gem, as a wish-fulfilling gem.
They're a guru of mind training.
Sorry?
They are, in fact, a guru for mind training.
Oh, utterly. They're our teachers. In fact, it's said that only when you reach the 3rd bodhisattva level of luminous can you treat all sentient beings as your teacher.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
We're at the preliminary, the far preliminary stages of the practice. And it's challenging. It's going to challenge all our instincts, because all our instincts are samsaric. They are samsara, the essence of samsara. So we're habituated to, respond with a negative state of mind when we receive a negative, stimulus from someone else. We see negativity from someone else, we return negativity. But here, it's simply saying that method doesn't work. It hasn't worked from beginningless time up until now. And we have to begin to turn it around. Why? Because all the beings who have entered the great vehicle path, with one voice recommend that this is the great doorway, the great gateway to the great vehicle, generating great compassion and bodhicitta. There is no other. So in order to generate great compassion and bodhicitta, we train in the first 7 verses of this text. And the first 3 verses are more general teaching, and the next 3 are more specific, dealing with specific difficult beings that we encounter. And we encounter them all the time, and we remember these encounters over and over and over again without resolving them. So we really have to check on our experience here. So here, Langri Tampa, in verse number 5, he's giving an example of a difficult type of person that we really struggle to understand. We really struggle to understand how to deal with such a person. And here Langri Tampa is saying, well, there is a way of dealing with such a person who, out of jealousy, abuses us and slanders us. And perhaps, we lose a lot of friends because of that slander and that abuse. So it really appears to harm us. And true, it is slander, it is abuse. But that actually is something that we need to overcome. They're not the enemy. The enemy is not the person who is slandering us and abusing us. The enemy really is the black karmic seeds that we've deposited in the center of our heart, which manifest according to external and internal conditions that create great suffering for us. The person who's abusing us is just a condition that is allowing these karmic seeds to manifest for us. And we are responsible for those karmic seeds. So there are different ways that we can, different lines of reasoning that we can apply to understanding our situation. And we need a lot of help as we're going through these types of mind training from others around us who are also undertaking mind training. So we can help out each other in this. So as Geshe Chekawa says, now back on verse 5, free of resentment, we should refrain from claiming, for instance, I am innocent. Others are to be blamed. Even if we are innocent, it doesn't really help us. Others are to be blamed. Like Langri Tampa, we should take the defeat upon ourselves. So genuinely, when that happens, especially when we're not to blame, we take on the full defeat. Let others, do their best, do their worst against us. And we will accept it with patience, with forbearance. So much spiritual advice is focused on generating this type of attitude. So we should take the defeat upon ourselves. It is also said that whenever misfortunes befall another or befell another, Langri Tampa would say, I too am part of him or her. So identifying with those who are suffering misfortune and not looking as a complete outsider is also extremely important. Or I am in him. I think Jampa here also mentions this Tibetan phrase can be interpreted as I am in him or in her. We shouldn't see ourselves as separate from other beings in this. And we should have empathy for the sufferings of others at all times. And so this is one finds in many of the texts on mind training and in sutra in general and so forth. So when we engage in giving an ethical discipline at present, we do so to purify our negative karma and accumulate merit. If we recognize those who slander us as sources of kindness, although this is not a substitute for the aforementioned two activities, that is, giving the victory to others and taking the defeat upon ourselves, it nevertheless cleanses us of resentment and purifies our negative karma. So if we see those who slander us as sources of kindness, now, okay, that's a bit of a leap for us. So we're going to have to pretend, fake it to begin with. Okay, deep down, we're still going to have resentment. But if we can start whittling away, chipping away at this resentment, we see that it's just fabricated by the way we're looking at things, by our own attitudes and so forth. So doing that is extremely beneficial for us. It does start to move us towards compassion. We understand the source of those who slander us as a source of kindness or kindness itself. So it cleanses us of resentment and purifies our negative karma. The Master said, taking the defeat upon ourselves prevents us from adding to our negative karma. So that's a wonderful piece of advice there. When we take on the defeat genuinely, okay, that's it. I'm never going to talk about this again. I'm taking on the defeat. And I'll just leave it at that. That purifies a lot of negative karma. And certainly we don't add to it. Langri Tangpa states, in regard to purification of negative karma and accumulation of merit, it is more effective to recognize those who baselessly slander you as great sources of kindness than it is to offer butterfried delicacies to each monk in the Pen region. So quite a few monks in the Pen region of Tibet. So to recognize the slanderer as a source of kindness is of great benefit to us. So bit by bit, we can get there and move from this current attitude that we have towards those who slander us. Also, Shantideva says in a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, since it is in dependence upon his malign intention that forbearance arises. So this is where the source of this comes from, Bodhisattva's way of life. So we generate patience because of the malign intention of others. It's really he who is the cause of forbearance. Like the true Dhamma, he is worthy of veneration. So we need to start to venerate that person. So also in terms of verse number 1, where it says, where Geshe Chekawa himself says, we take on other beings as wish-fulfilling gems, because in dependence on them, I attain complete enlightenment. There's no other way at all. So we need to venerate all beings who are like wish-fulfilling gems, especially those who harm us, who slander us, who destroy our happiness in this life and so forth. They are the ones that are really worthy of veneration. To substantiate this assertion, Shantideva states in the following that forbearance is more powerful than ethical discipline. When he says, there is no negativity like anger, there is no fortitude like forbearance. So this presents the forbearance of being unperturbed by harms. So true, there is no negativity like anger, because anger is the worst of all the afflictions, the root afflictions. In fact, anger corresponds to the hot hells, hatred corresponds to the cold hells, and so forth. And anger takes us to the deepest level of hell. So stopping that, the forbearance that stops anger, is extremely important for us. And it is as it said here, it's one of the highest ethical practices, because it stops rebirth in the deepest hell. Okay, so then in verse number 6. 6 is the forbearance of voluntarily accepting suffering. So again, we're looking at another case of a person who is particularly problematic for us. So when someone to whom we have rendered help in the past, or in whom we have placed great hope, betrays or slanders us, we should contemplate them as our teacher with a sense of gratitude. This is presented in the following. Even if one whom I have helped, or in whom I have placed great hope, gravely mistreats me in hurtful ways, I will train myself to view him as my sublime teacher. So another type of encounter that we have with others is extremely painful. It could be, someone we know. It could be a relative. It could be a child. It could be a brother or sister or a cousin. It could be a friend. Someone that we give time, love, money, and so forth to, really in an unreservedly, then turns out to be, treats us like an enemy. This, of course, is hard for us to bear. Then, as Chekawa says, as for expectation, Drom Trungpa once remarked, so Drom Trungpa was one of the main disciples of Atisha, and he recalls that in Kham, I went to visit the teacher Sherapar, a friend close to my heart. I went knowing he had not invited me, and he took offense at this and sent me away. He ordered others to remove all my belongings, and he himself locked me in a dark room. That was when it became clear whether I had trained my mind in loving kindness and compassion, and whether the lines, may these sufferings ripen upon me, may all happiness ripen upon them, had remained a lie for me. So in other words, whether I was really practicing them or not. So we must never retaliate with resentment. So in fact, he realized at that point, when he was mistreated by this person that he had reverence for, Sherapar, that he wasn't practicing in the true sense. And he wasn't really able to say, may these sufferings ripen upon me, may all my happiness ripen upon them. Furthermore, relating this to our own situation, were it not for inferior karma, such events would not befall us. So again, it comes down to our karma. All of what befalls us is due to our own past actions. So our situation is created by us. As one monk once said, like dust in a dusty tunnel, what arises in the heart settles in the heart. So what settles in the heart and what is experienced in the heart was at some stage generated in the heart. External things cannot settle in our heart, cannot be experienced internally at the core of our being. So we must never retaliate with resentment. Then after that, for it has been stated, previously I caused harms such as these to other sentient beings, so it is right that today such injuries befall me, I who have harmed others. So we recall the law of internal causation, and the harm that I experience is what I cause in other beings. We should think that we ourselves are to blame for whatever befalls us, and in this manner, by maintaining a warm heart, we remain happy. And because we do not transfer the blame to others, they too remain happy. We should reflect, this is due to my own karma. It is established that no one harms the noble ones who have eliminated their negative karma. So the noble beings, the Arya beings, who have attained transcendent realization, are beyond being harmed. So that's why we need to become an Arya being, a noble being. And they have eliminated their negative karma. Well, in fact, they've eliminated producing new negative karma. They have no projecting karma because they've directly perceived emptiness. So to get to that stage is a great milestone in anyone's practice. And one, to a degree, can start to relax from them because, in a sense, one is a transcendent being, although one has still got to purify objects to be purified by the path of meditation. Even from the other's perspective, it is our own negative karma that caused them to injure us. So we should reflect, because of me, he will have to go to the lower realms. I am to blame for this. So in that situation, when we're harmed by others, we should see the harm as coming from my own karma, and the person that's acting as a condition for our negative karma to ripen are themselves generating negative karma that will mature in a rebirth in hell, for instance, or in a lower realm. And that's because of me. I am to blame for this. So we should start to reverse the way that we're looking at this situation when others harm us, and have compassion for the person who is harming us. So then on the next page, 286. Impelled by my own karma, the perpetrators have brought this harm upon me. Because of this, they'll be in the pits of hell. So it is not I who has destroyed them. So true, the actual karma that causes rebirth in hell is what we ourselves generate internally. So even though they've harmed me, and even though it's really, they're an instrument of my own negative karma in that situation, it's not I that has destroyed them. Thus, it is appropriate to protect these beings from their suffering. So we need to protect them from this. Again, it has been stated, those who falsely accuse me and others who cause me harm, likewise those who insult me, may they all share in enlightenment. So we have to get to the point where we're sincerely generating this wish. We have this genuine wish that anyone that harms me, may they attain enlightenment. So at present, we struggle to get to that level. And if we do, it's often on a very superficial level. We might generate some artificial sincerity, but it doesn't last very long. But we have to get to the genuine attitude, the genuine aspiration So this then creates happiness for us. When we get to the genuine level, then we're starting to harm the deeper level faults within us. And that gives us a little bit more space in which to function. We can relax a little bit more. Also, it is said, even if others return kindness with harm, I will practice responding with great compassion. The most excellent beings of this world answer injury with benevolence. So again, just this on this same topic, same theme, the most excellent beings of this world answer injury with benevolence. So we need to hear this again and again to actually begin to purify our negative emotions. Then it goes on, Chekawa goes on to say, to contemplate them gratefully as spiritual teachers refers to the following. Our spiritual teachers are embodiments of great kindness, for they bestow on us the vows, tantric vows and so forth, provide us with methods of meditative practice, and reveal to us the path to liberation. Of course, if we fail to contemplate this and fail to guard this contemplation, we will not tread the path. We will not enter the path. So reflect. What this being has given me helps purify my negative karma and accomplish my accumulations of merit and wisdom. He has therefore benefited me. So I must view him as my spiritual teacher, no different from the one who has conferred on me the oral transmissions of the meditative practices. In this respect, Atisha's Song of Blissfulness states, whether someone is foe or friend, these objects that give rise to afflictions, he who sees them as spiritual teachers will be joyful wherever he or she resides. So if we can regard all beings around us as spiritual teachers, we will be joyful wherever we are. Similarly, if we can regard other beings as wish-fulfilling gems, in relation to which or in dependence on whom we will attain complete enlightenment, we'll be happy. Because what would make us unhappy? What being would make us unhappy if they're a wish-fulfilling gem, even though they act like a foe, an enemy to me? When such thoughts arise spontaneously, our mind is trained. So it even gives us the measure of being trained. When spontaneously this thought just keeps arising, oh, this person that's slandering me, that's yelling at me, that's beating me, that's robbing me, that is my spiritual teacher, genuinely, then we've reached, when that spontaneously arises, our mind is trained. We've come out the other side of mind training. Then, even if we have no other practice, whatever acts we engage in turn into aspects of the path to enlightenment. So these words are incredibly weighty. And it's to have an indication of what the measure of being fully trained is just wonderful, which occurs here. When such thoughts arise spontaneously. This is like the saying, one cannot find excrement in the land of gold. Right. So it's like that saying. Dharma refers to the transformation of your mind. Again, an incredibly important statement. So what is the transformation of our mind? It's mind training, of course. And it's turning our mind around, instead of seeing others as enemies, to seeing them all as friends, all as our spiritual teacher. So that is the transformation of Dharma. So it's a transformation of our mind and not the transformation of the external environment. For a trained person, even were the three worlds, that is, the human world, the celestial gods, and the demons, animals, and so forth, were to rise up as his or her enemies, his or her mind would not be affected by non-virtue and suffering. So that again is a weighty statement. Since no one can vanquish him or her, they are called a hero. So hero, giving a definition of hero here, they cannot be vanquished, cannot be conquered, cannot be beaten, because they have no enemies other than the afflictions. And the afflictions can be defeated, can be eliminated. But here's external enemies, such as other beings, we see them as our spiritual teachers. So by doing that, this resolves much of our existence, much of the problematic nature of our existence. So verse 6. So verses 4, 5, and 6 are really dealing with difficult beings and how we should tolerate their harms and take on their harms and offer them victory and so forth. The first three verses, 1, 2, and 3, are more like the general practice, holding others as supreme, myself as lowest, and identifying negative afflictions and eliminating as soon as we become aware of them. 4, 5, and 6 are more like, here are beings who are difficult to handle. When that occurs, when we encounter them, and we have memories of all three types, copious memories of all these three types of verse 4, 5, and 6, then treat them as supreme, offer them the victory.
Ian,
yes.
did you want the questions to be held to the end? Or should people
Not
just...
necessarily. If there's any questions that come up, yeah, they can come up.
Okay.
Thank you. I do have one, Ian, which
yes.
is, for me, nowadays, it's not so much individual beings that are an issue for me. It would be more like politicians and greedy corporations, okay? So
yes.
I'm thinking that probably when this was written previously, that was not such a big issue. It may not have. So I'm just wondering, like, what's your best advice that you've derived out of your studies about how you can approach it? Because there's no individual necessarily,
well,
but I have an enormous amount of respect towards, as you know, Woolworths and Coles over here. It's outrageous. Yeah, what's happening?
Right, and it's international. It's all over the place. For me, what I think of in this circumstance is just to see them in the same light. They're just individuals whom we regard as our enemy, that are harming us on some level. We should see them equally as spiritual teachers, have great patience, see them as wish-fulfilling gems. That is, in any particular corporation, the CEO, the vice CEO, the board of directors, all the people working there, all of them as wish-fulfilling gems, independence on whom we will attain enlightenment. Now, we can, at the same time, disagree with the policies of that company, but we don't hate any of the beings that are working there. They're just, for various reasons, they're acting in a particular way for profit, whatever. They're misguided to some degree, more, greater or lesser degree. But still, these individuals that comprise those companies are mother sentient beings. They're also like wish-fulfilling gems on whom we will depend in order to attain enlightenment. We can't exclude any of them. So the story in Tibet, that one monkey had a lady living next door, and she had this enemy on the other side, whom she said, I can generate compassion for all sentient beings except for my neighbor. you know, but we can't exclude anyone. We have to be able to bring them in and see them in this way, in this, within the scope or within the advice of this mind training. At the same time, we also understand the faults of the companies, of the particular multinational corporation, and the harm that it's doing to the environment, and whatever politicians, or the harm they're doing to you know, the democratic principles in a country and so forth. Yet still, that being is like a wish-fulfilling gem. So we can point out their faults, but we don't do it with hatred or anger or resentment. None of the 20 negative mental factors or the 6 root afflictions. We try and stop that completely. So anyway, that's my opinion on that. I think it's just better that we use this as a comprehensive manual of practice and bring everyone into this, the sphere of all sentient beings, and see them as our spiritual teachers. Right, and we go on to verse number 7. Now, number 7 is like the condensation of the previous 6 verses. So 7 in brief. Now, in brief is mentioned there. So whatever happened before, now we're going to summarize this down. One must train to offer both directly and indirectly all the benefits and joys to our dear mother sentient beings, and to take all their hurts and pains into the depths of our hearts. This is presented in the following. So verse 7. In brief, I will train myself to offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all the hurts and pains of all my mothers. So this is the verse on Tonglen. So Tonglen is the core practice coming from, you know, Shantideva, also Nagarjuna, that is the core advice of mind training. So Chekawa, Geshe Chekawa then expands on this. In brief refers to condensing all the preceding points. So if we want an even briefer practice than the 8 verses, we can go just 2 verses, 7 and 8. Respectfully suggests that we take these into the depths of our hearts while contemplating the kindness of our mothers. In other words, we should practice giving and taking not merely in words, but from the depths of our heart. In practice, if we give away such factors of joy as food, medicine, and so on, while taking upon ourselves all the hurts and pains of sentient beings, this is a cause for causing birth in higher realms and attaining definite goodness. Definite goodness there means liberation. If, however, we are not able to actually practice this, we should instead perform the taking mentally by engaging the meditation of giving and taking and dedicating all the joys of this life. So we can do it just on a mental level, which is where we are at present. Our practice is really just on the level of visualization. And to some degree, we can give things to others. So it's a partial actual practice as well. When making aspiration prayers, we should utter from the depths of our hearts the following lines from a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. My own happiness and others' suffering, if I do not thoroughly exchange them, I will not become fully enlightened. In this cyclic existence too, I'll find no joy. So a summation of all these points is here given in the Bodhisattva's way of life. My own happiness and others' suffering, if I do not exchange them, genuinely exchange them, with an aspiration reaching down to the deepest depths of my heart in the present moment, then I do not activate the causes for becoming fully enlightened. So it has to be on a genuine level. And also, I won't be happy in this life, in the samsara that that is my 5 aggregates. My mind-body continuum is samsara. So in this mind-body continuum that I possess, I'm not going to find much joy, genuine joy. But then when we think about it, what genuine joy have I found so far in this life? Not much. So this is an indication that we haven't practiced this from the depths of our heart. So we have to question ourselves, why haven't I taken this to heart? Why haven't I taken it seriously? Right. So 8. Since in all these practices, it is possible to become defiled, so contaminated, impure. So in all these practices, it is possible that one's motivation becomes impure, that one has anger arising when one starts thinking about the enemy. Instead of seeing them as a spiritual friend, one starts thinking along the lines of harming them, and hating them, being angry with them, resenting them, being jealous of them, all the rest come up. So defiled. It is possible to become defiled. We should make sure that they remain untainted by even the slightest mundane consideration of this life. And with the awareness that recognizes all phenomena as illusion-like, we should train to be utterly free of attachment. This is presented in the following. By ensuring that all this remains undefiled from the stains of the 8 mundane concerns, and by understanding all things as illusions, I will train myself to be free of the bondage of clinging. So verse 8 now has moved to the profound practices. So the previous 7 verses were dealing with method. We're dealing with great compassion and bodhicitta. So that's the core practice. The core practice of mind training is really bodhicitta. And it's the entire preliminary practice. However, unless it's conjoined with profound practices coming from the profound lineage of Manjushri through Nagarjuna, through Aryadeva, Buddha Palita, Chandrakirti, and so forth, then we don't establish uncontaminated practices. We don't get beyond defilement. The practice doesn't become pure. So therefore, the 8th verse here is to be implemented. Now here, the remedy, the method, is this. So here talking about emptiness being a method here. So Chekawa goes on to say, when tainted with mundane concerns, such as the desire to be perceived by others as praiseworthy, we fall under the influence of the 8 mundane concerns, and our pursuits become those of self-interest. So we have to be careful of the 8 mundane concerns. Now, what are the 8 mundane concerns? So these are states that we're well versed in. So these can contaminate our practice. So we'll just go through them in a little bit of depth. So the 8 are gain and loss. So in Tibetan, nye dhamma nye. So gain, whatever we find, whatever we acquire, property, money, friends, so forth, is gain. What is referred to as gain here. And loss is the opposite of that, losing wealth, losing friends, losing property. So these are mundane concerns that are ever present. They're always at the back of our minds. We're checking our bank balance. we're checking all the time whether we've got insurance in place to cover, fire and theft and so forth. So this issue of gain and loss is ever present for ordinary beings such as ourselves. These are worldly concerns that are things that we have to take notice of, but they're a little bit heavy as well, especially the loss aspect. When we lose stuff, it's hard on us. It's heavy for us. We might make a bad investment and lose tens of thousands of dollars, hard-earned money, and so on. It's hard for us. It's hard just to wave it off. And even if openly or to others, we appear as if we're unconcerned about it, still in the depths of the night, the thought arises about just how we lost that wealth and how we're going to get it back again and how we're going to make up for it and so forth. So gain and loss are ever-present experiences for us. Then the second two, fame and disgrace, Nyen Minyen in Tibetan. Fame, repute, being well known, reputation, having a reputation. All of this is a worldly concern. And whether we can, hold our head high in society or not, these are considerations for us. And even if we say we're just unconcerned by this, if anyone slanders us, and suddenly the thought that we're going to lose our reputation, they'll believe what this person is saying, for instance, then we see that it is a concern for us. It's a mundane concern for us. So Nyen, fame, our reputation. And at times, the criticism leveled at us is absolutely true, dealing with faults that we have. And we would try and hide these faults and not have them broadcast, on on media, on social media and so forth. But, it can be broadcast there. And so the opposite of fame, disgrace arises, ill repute. Our friends don't talk to us anymore. And so on. So it's these two, fame and disgrace or repute, ill repute, are ever-present emotional states that we shouldn't hold too tightly to. Otherwise, it's people can commit suicide due to being disgraced or through, their reputation being destroyed. We should not take it too seriously. And in fact, there's a lot of advice on this in the text about, standing back from these 8 worldly concerns and not investing too much time or faith or importance in these 8 worldly concerns, because we often don't have much control over them. In fact, very little control. And now the next two are praise and blame, turdame in Tibetan. And so praise, it's a bit like fame, but it's slightly different. So being praised, like taking joy in being praised. Praise can be a heavy burden for us as well. And it's good not to be attached to praise, not welcome it, not take joy in it. And blame also, when we're blamed, whether it's true or false, we shouldn't take too much stock in that either, and not be moved by being blamed, whether it's true or not, and just being able to relax with it relax with that sort of worldly concern, not taking it too seriously. And then the 7 and 8 are really pleasure and pain. So pleasure and pain here are also taking pleasure in gain, taking pleasure in fame, taking pleasure in praise, taking pleasure in anything else, or being in pain over loss, being in pain over disgrace, being in pain over being blamed, or pain, in general to other stuff. So these 8 worldly concerns are like the water that we're swimming in. And at times we're sinking, at times we're floating. Sinking and floating in this ocean of the 8 worldly concerns. So just like in real water, if we're there, the more we struggle to be afloat, the more we tend to sink. So too with the 8 worldly concerns. The more we're concerned about them, the more we tend to sink. The more we don't worry about them and see them as just the reflection of our past karma manifesting at any particular time, which we have not much control over, except that we are responsible for the karmic result manifesting, then we need to give ourselves a little space here with these 8 worldly concerns. The 8 worldly concerns here are regarded as stains by which we become defiled. So we need to get beyond this sort of defilement, this sort of contamination. Now, the contaminants themselves are again the afflictions. The contaminants that cause this defilement are the 6 root afflictions and the 20 branch afflictions. So then again, we have, say, the 5 poisons, and 4 of them are the 4 root afflictions. So the 5 poisons, again, we should bring to mind, which are the cause of all defilement, or associated with defilement and contamination. They are ignorance, anger, attachment, pride, and jealousy. So by ensuring that, in verse number 8, by ensuring that all this, that is the practice of generating great compassion, remains uncontaminated from the stains of the 8 mundane concerns, and by understanding all things to be like illusions, I will train myself to be free of the bondage of clinging. So again, just to I'll just reread that commentary by Chekawa again. Thus, the remedy, the method is this: when tainted with mundane concerns, such as the desire to be perceived by others as praiseworthy, we fall under the influence of the 8 mundane concerns, and our pursuits become those of self-interest. So self-interest there really self-importance, self-cherishing, and so on. So this, the Rang Chenzin in Tibetan, which is the an opponent to great compassion. So we fall under the influence of the 8 mundane concerns, and our pursuits become those of self-interest, the pursuit of our own self-importance, and so on. So this is a little bit different than self-grasping. Or grasping at a self of person and phenomenon. So again, even though we're talking about understanding emptiness in this verse, Chekawa is again pushing it back towards self-cherishing, that we need to still eliminate self-cherishing or self-importance as the mix, as part of the mix for attaining the undefiled or uncontaminated state. So in a sense here, one can see just how important great compassion is in this entire practice, that it needs to be emphasized at all times. When this occurs, Geshe Chekawa says, then the sacred teachings have been turned into demons. When we're practicing, say, the first 7 verses, but then we're not practicing it purely, we're starting to think about what are we going to get out of it. So we're thinking of gain and loss. What are we gaining from this? Or are we going to generate a reputation as a practitioner, as a bodhisattva, and so on? Will I be praised? If all of this starts coming up, taking pleasure in being praised and so forth, then this has converted our practice of the sacred teachings into almost, like a demonic practice, because it's focused on just our own self-interest. So as it says, our pursuits become those of self-interest. If we understand these mundane concerns as illusion-like, later we will relinquish them. So later, he says here, we will relinquish them. What we have to do, in a way, is just hang in there with these practices. And whenever the 8 worldly concerns come up, well, we become aware of them. And we, again, try to purify them as much as we can, come back to a pure motivation of compassion for the sake of others. It's not out of self-interest, not for praise for me or gain for me or any of these other things, because that would be just the victory of self-interest. And in a sense, self-interest has maintained the victory over our aspirations from beginningless time. So we need to keep a sustained effort to gradually whittle this down so that we start to weaken self-interest and generate a genuine interest in the welfare of others. So if we understand these mundane concerns as illusion-like, later we will relinquish them. So these concerns, that is gain, fame, praise, and so forth, are like an illusion. Why are they like an illusion? Because actually there's no self. There is no personal self. We think there's a self because we have the view of the perishable composite firmly entrenched in the center of our hearts. We think that there is an I that experiences what we experience, that gets up and walks around and so forth. That sense of I that we have is extremely durable. And gradually, though, we will be able to gain clarity internally through these practices of mind training to really begin to gain the clarity that allows us to understand the nature of the I. In fact, if there's no I, then all these mundane concerns also vanish, because who gains anything? Who has fame? Who has praise? It is really just an illusion of a self, is all that exists. There is no real gain and so on. There's no real being who gains anything and so forth. So Chekawa then goes on to say, nothing within our present experience possesses substantial reality. So substantial reality, this is looking at selflessness on a coarser level even. that even when the self of person is viewed, and say, for instance, from the point of view of the Sautrantika school, that sees the personal self as being free of both a permanent, single, and autonomous self on course level, and being free of a self-sufficient, substantially established or substantially existent self on a subtle level. So neither of those types of self exist for us as an individual. In other words, when we look at the I, and as the thought I arises, the object of that thought, which is the self, from the higher school's point of view, there is just a mere self. That's the mere, a label that's imputed, or a term labeled upon the five aggregates. But there is no I, there is no substantial I that can be found. So in fact, I has no substantial reality. So this issue of I is of central importance, and not only in Buddhism, but other philosophical positions, other religions and so forth also spend a great deal of time examining this issue. Within Buddhism, it is the core issue, determining what I is and gaining clarity about the whole question, what is imputed as I, and what is the process of imputing I. So this we need to examine over a long period with some consistency to start to get a handle on what is meant by the thought of I. Now, within Buddhism, selflessness is presented as a universal truth. Not only is the person free of a self, but all phenomena in general are free of a self. And we accept that on a verbal level, but our experience still, which is both on a mentally fabricated and on an innate level, we still are in the process of opening this area up so that we can understand it more clearly. So gradually, little by little, little bit by little bit, we will come to understand this. In order to understand it also, we need to generate a lot of merit. Because our success in developing wisdom depends on our accumulation of merit. And there's no greater process of generating merit than as set out in the first 7 verses of mind training, because this is the greatest, presents the greatest method for generating vast, pervasive merit for ourselves. So, now looking at selflessness, then Chekawa goes on to say, it has been stated, so among these empty phenomena, what is there to gain or to lose? Who provides you with what service? And who subjects you to insults? So really, it's like that. So all these empty phenomena that exist, where there is no truly existent object anywhere in the universe, all these empty phenomena, among them, what is there to gain or to lose? Where is there gain or loss? And who would gain or lose it if there were? So the objects themselves, when we examine them, are empty. And in fact, another way we can approach this is also from the point of view of modern quantum theory. And even in quantum theory, especially as it developed in the 1920s, to the point of the later presentation of quantum theory. In fact, there are wonderful texts, books on this. I once remember reading a book by Arthur Eddington, who he did these lectures in England in the 1926, 27, I think, and the book was published on these lectures called The Nature of the Physical World, where he talks, this is 100 years ago, he talks on quantum theory and about how these advances in this theory have enabled scientists to really begin to understand the subtlest level of physical reality. But what they found also is quite paradoxical, because at the subtlest level, you have particles that can either be proven to be particles or they're waves. They have the qualities of both. And if, for instance, there is an observer present who observes a wave function, the wave function, according to the influence of that observer, causes the wave function to collapse into a particle. But if the observer is not there, it doesn't collapse into a particle. Now, this paradox has completely, what could you say, stretched the capacity of scientists to really understand what matter is. And in fact, even Eddington, when he comments on this, starts to talk about matter as being existing in a substratum of some sort of awareness. This is in 1927. So scientists, even at that period, with these great strides, this great progress that was made into understanding the subtlest level of matter, were beginning to wonder what connection this had even with consciousness itself. So this is extremely useful for us also to contemplate. So, empty phenomena. So we see in this first line, so among these empty phenomena, what is there to gain or to lose? So if these phenomena around us, like tables and chairs and so forth, that are composed of atoms and molecules, and the atoms are composed of nuclei and electrons, and each of these electrons and the nuclei, the protons and the neutrons, also are composed of quarks and so forth. But each of these, they are simply really just nothing more than particles or waves, and both are valid. And they're unfindable, ultimately. Then we can see that things are empty in terms of objects. So there's no objects that really can be thought of as being true, that exist in the way they appear to exist. So even going back to quantum theory can be helpful in understanding how things can be empty. So we shouldn't take the appearance of the external world as being how it exists. And so too with ourselves, we shouldn't take our appearance, whether external or internal, as being proof, that appearance being proof that we truly exist. We should not do that. We should instead see things as empty. By doing this, this helps to undermine the eight worldly dharmas. So gain, loss, fame, disgrace, praise, blame, pleasure, pain, all of these things that arise in relation to external objects that are empty, that very fact of being empty undermines the thought, the ignorance that grasps these objects as truly existing. That very ignorance is the ignorance that supports the defilements, that supports the contaminants, which are the afflictions and the branch afflictions. So in saying this, in this 8th verse by Langri Tangpa, he's bringing us back to the Buddhist view of emptiness and the importance of the Buddhist view of emptiness as a necessary co-component of entering the path leading to liberation and enlightenment. So also he mentions now, just underneath that verse, from whence do pleasure and pain arise? What is there to be sad or joyful about? So in fact, if all things are empty, then a person insults us with words. The words are empty. The person's tongue is empty. Their physical body is empty. Their minds and mental factors are empty of true existence. So from whence do pleasure and pain arise? Why would we have pain arising from those words? What is there to be sad or joyful about? What object should we be happy or sad about? If in fact they are empty of true existence. And further, that all things are just like space, I for one shall accept. So in other words, because of the empty nature of the external universe and our physical body, and also minds and mental factors, all states of awareness are equally empty. And because of that, therefore, all things are just like space. I, for one, shall accept this. So, how do we apply this then to the previous 7 verses? Well, we're adding a filter, in a way, to understanding this whole process of generating compassion towards our enemies. Our enemies actually don't exist. The words by which they slander us do not exist. Our ears actually do not truly exist. They're empty. And so forth. So all of this, all of the practice of generating great compassion must be understood within the context of understanding the empty nature of things around us. Then that also gives us, like, a dual mode of practice that helps us to generate great compassion. It helps us to generate the 2 types of bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta and conventional bodhicitta. But first for us really is generating great compassion and training our mind in seeing others, as wish-fulfilling gems. By seeing them as wish-fulfilling gems, then gradually we can undermine our tendency to hate them and dislike them and so forth. Because all of these, the 8 worldly concerns and all of the 5 poisons or the 6 poisons, do not help us at all, and they're reactions to objects that don't truly exist. So not only should we have compassion towards others, we also understand others are empty of true existence, just as we are ourselves. So I'm just wondering, are there any questions on this section before we do the final few verses or the final few words of Chekawa? So anyway, if there are, please just send the question in. But this area of emptiness is equally important. It's challenging. And the reason why it's challenging is that we often feel that we will cease to exist if all things are empty. And we're very attached to existing. And this attachment to existence is the very engine of samsara, the very engine of reincarnation. And we've achieved this current rebirth really due to attachment. And we're attached to existence. This we can see because the 12 links, which are the process by which we attain rebirth, there are two types of attachment there, craving and grasping, which are the 8th and 9th link, which give rise to existence. It's craving and grasping for existence that keeps samsara functioning. And so we can see for ourselves that we have this tendency to crave and grasp at existing in this world. And through that, we achieve reincarnation and we attain a new birth. This at present for us is necessary because we have still quite a long way to go. We need many human rebirths, with conducive conditions so that we can train ourselves in these practices. And this training is going to take a long time. And we need that sort of time. We need that sort of space in order to be able to gain an enduring, relaxed, open type of practice that benefits us and benefits others around us. And we need to also think about how everyone else is in the same boat. Everyone else is sort of born here in this brief life, and they're trying to sort things out. They're trying to have a degree of happiness and fulfillment, just like we are. And as the Geshe Lamritampa mentions, that we should see them as really being not different than ourselves. That, in fact, they are part of us. We are part of them. That we are connected. The part of the process is to see this sort of overlap and to develop this as part of our practice in generating great compassion. Right, so we'll go on to the very last section here as well. So as Geshe Chekawa says, as for supplicating all objects of refuge and reciting this as an aspiration, it is as follows. So in other words, in order to bring to mind all objects of refuge, such as the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and using these 8 verses as our aspirational prayer, then we can do this as follows. We should make mandala offerings to the teachers and the 3 jewels and make the following supplication. If you, my teachers, the Buddhas of the 3 times, and all the Bodhisattvas, possess blessings and compassion, if you, the 10 male and 10 female wrathful deities, possess power and might, and if you, the wisdom dakinis, possess strength and abilities, bless me so that the meaning of these 8 verses will be realized in me. Bless me so that all the suffering and its origin of all sentient beings ripens upon me, and that all the fruits of my awakening mind ripen upon all beings. We should relate this in the same manner to all 4 truths and train our mind. So in other words, we also relate this to the 4 noble truths, truth of suffering, the truth of origin, the truth of cessation, the truth of path. Bringing that to mind because that was the first turning of the wheel in Sarnath, where the Buddha first addressed the 5 companions to the Buddha and taught the essential meaning of Buddhism, which is the 4 noble truths. So whatever virtuous actions such as these mind training practices we may perform, afterward we should recite this aspiration prayer of the 8 verses. Making such an aspiration creates propensities for the awakening mind. We should recite the following aspiration prayer. To such activities of root virtue, I will dedicate all my time, all my months, and all my years. In the future, too, I will make sure to encounter spiritual teachers and to associate with virtuous companions. So that aspiration also is very, very beneficial for us to do. We should do it. We should recite these prayers of aspiration repeatedly. So we can come to these aspirational prayers at any time and just recite them. They are extremely pertinent and beneficial for us. So finally, the text says, this commentary on the 8 verses of the Bodhisattva Langri Tangpa was composed by Chekawa Yeshidoji. This commentary on the root verses constitutes a profound instruction on mind training. Please strive in this, may all realization arise in the hearts of all. May its realization arise in the hearts of all. So, this is an amazing commentary and very beneficial. Geshe Chekawa also composed the 7 verses on mind training, which again is one of the most popular presentations of mind training. A truly wonderful, erudite individual who has benefited countless beings. So we also benefit at present by just reading his words. I just wish to thank everyone for coming to this sort of discussion on mind training, to the work of Geshe Chekawa. And I've really personally benefited much by being able to read through Geshe Chekawa's commentary, and he is an absolutely wonderful Bodhisattva practitioner. I wish everyone the best, great results from their continued practice, and I hope that these Geshe Chekawa's commentary will be of some continued benefit. And I've much enjoyed getting to know a little bit yourselves, and I wish all the benefit for the center as well. And so thank you. So I think we could probably now just do the dedication prayers.
Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. Lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Long life, prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The wish granting of this fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. A swift return prayer for His Lama Zopa Rinpoche, fearless teacher and assembly of children, the victorious ones, Shravakas, Brahmaka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings. You suddenly departed for peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, to the undeceiving truth, as the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones. May the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for the fortunate disciples. Long life prayer for Lama Tenzin Osalhita. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindfully loving concern for us, and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. Long life prayer for Geshe Sharab. Beloved teacher, leading your students with wisdom and compassion, explain through exacting discernment the steps of the graduated path. You are the unequal guide. Please live a long and stable life.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.